$900. That's the insane fine our HOA president slapped on me for building wind barriers to shield my 16-year-old twin boys from flying debris during a deadly blizzard. I'm Eugene Walsh. While power lines snapped like gunfire and winds howled, this entitled woman pounded on my door in freezing sleet, demanding I tear them down. Why? My ugly barriers, paid for and installed on my own property, were ruining the neighborhood's reputation and making us look like a trailer park. Her words, sneering in her designer coat beside her BMW with Luxury One plates.
I don't care about the storm, Eugene. Aesthetics matter more.
This queen bee has never helped a neighbor, but threaten her curb appeal? My family's safety becomes the problem. What she didn't know, I'm a quality control inspector. I hunt flaws for a living, and I just uncovered something that could destroy her little empire. What would you do if an HOA fined you for protecting your kids? Drop your location in the comments. Let me paint you a picture of where this all started. It's February 2024, and I'm living in Sunset Meadows, this newer development outside Austin, Texas. Picture-perfect houses, manicured lawns, and the kind of HOA that sends you violation notices if your trash can lid is facing the wrong direction. I moved here 3 years ago after my wife Sarah passed away from a workplace accident. She died because some supervisor ignored safety protocols to save a few bucks. That experience changed me, made me obsessive about following regulations and protecting the people I care about. Now it's just me and my twin boys, Marcus and David, who are 16 and everything to me. The smell of cedar mulch always reminds me of that February morning when I first noticed the storm warnings. I was drinking my coffee, checking the weather radar like I do every morning, old habits from my job as a quality control inspector at a manufacturing plant. The National Weather Service was calling for a major ice storm with winds up to 60 miles per hour. Now, when you've seen what happens when people ignore safety warnings, you don't mess around. I'd lived through the Texas ice storms of 2021, watched neighbors lose power for weeks because ice-loaded tree branches took down power lines. So I did what any reasonable person would do. I started preparing. I drove to Home Depot and bought professional-grade wind barrier materials. We're talking heavy-duty mesh fabric, steel stakes, the works. Cost me about $400, but that's nothing compared to replacing windows or dealing with structural damage from flying debris. The next morning, I spent 6 hours installing these barriers around my property. They're designed to redirect wind flow and protect against flying objects. Basic physics, really. The material is specifically engineered to reduce wind speed by about 40% within a 15-foot radius. I positioned them strategically around the house, especially near the windows facing the main wind direction. My neighbor Jerry, who's a retired firefighter, stopped by around noon. "Smart thinking, Eugene," he said, examining my work. "Wish more folks took storm prep seriously." The barriers were visible from the street, sure, but they were temporary and clearly functional. Think of it like putting plywood over your windows, just more sophisticated. That's when I met Natasha Richmond. Picture this. Perfectly styled blonde hair that doesn't move in the wind, designer workout clothes that have never seen actual exercise, and the kind of smile that never reaches the eyes. She drives a white BMW with a license plate that reads Luxury One. I'm not making this up. Natasha had moved to the neighborhood about 18 months before and somehow talked her way into becoming HOA president. She used to sell luxury real estate, and she treated our community like her personal showcase property. Every decision was about maintaining what she called resort-like aesthetics. She marched up my driveway that afternoon like she owned the place. "Excuse me, but what exactly is all this?" she said, gesturing at my wind barriers with obvious disgust. "Storm preparation," I replied. "We've got severe weather coming in tonight." "Well, it looks absolutely terrible, like we're living in a construction zone. This is supposed to be an upscale community, not some kind of disaster area." I tried to explain the safety aspect, but she cut me off. "I don't care what it's for. It's an eyesore, and I'm sure it violates our community standards. You need to remove it immediately." "The storm starts tonight," I said. "I'll take them down as soon as the weather passes." Her response still makes my blood pressure spike. "Mr. Walsh, I don't think you understand how this works. I'm the president of this HOA, and maintaining property values is my primary responsibility. These contraptions make our neighborhood look cheap." That night, as ice began coating the trees and winds picked up, I watched through my protected windows as debris flew through the neighborhood. My barriers worked perfectly. Not a single piece of damage to my property. But at 7 a.m. the next morning, there was an official HOA violation notice taped to my front door. $900 for ruining the neighborhood aesthetic during community showcase period. The violation notice was printed on official HOA letterhead, complete with legal-sounding language that made my head spin. But here's what really got me fired up. It wasn't just about my wind barriers. Natasha had weaponized the HOA board to create something called emergency aesthetic standards. I called the HOA office that Monday morning, and Natasha's assistant, this nervous young woman who always sounded like she was afraid of getting in trouble, explained that the board had held an emergency session over the weekend. They'd voted to prohibit any weather modifications that were visible from public areas during what they called community showcase periods. What exactly is a community showcase period? I asked. Well, it's whenever potential buyers might be touring the neighborhood. So let me get this straight. They created a rule that prioritized selling houses over protecting the ones people already lived in. The whole thing reeked of Natasha's real estate background. But here's where my quality control training kicked in. When you spend your days looking for defects in manufacturing processes, you develop an eye for things that don't meet standards. And as I walked around our community that week, I started noticing things. The first thing I spotted was our community pool area. It's this gorgeous centerpiece that Natasha loves to brag about, sparkling blue water, decorative stonework, the whole 9 yards. But when I looked closer, I noticed something that made my inspector instincts go crazy. There were no required safety equipment stations visible anywhere around the pool perimeter. See, Texas Health Code requires specific safety equipment at public pools, things like reaching poles, ring buoys, and first aid stations. These aren't suggestions. They're mandatory for any pool serving more than 20 families. I did some quick math. Our HOA has 67 homes. That pool needed safety equipment, and it needed proper inspection certification posted where residents could see it. I started taking pictures with my phone, making sure to timestamp everything. Old habit from work, document everything, because memory fades but photographs don't. Then I noticed something else that made my skin crawl. Our kids' playground sits right next to the community center, and it gets heavy use every afternoon when school lets out. But when I examined the equipment more closely, I couldn't find any inspection tags. In Texas, playground equipment in communities like ours requires annual safety inspections by certified professionals. I called the county health department Tuesday afternoon. Hi, I'm calling to check on required inspections for community amenities. Can you tell me when our playground was last certified? The woman on the phone was helpful but concerning. Let me check. Sunset Meadows Development. I don't show any playground inspection records for your community in the past 3 years. 3 years. My boys had been playing on equipment that hadn't been properly inspected since before we moved in. That evening, I drafted a polite email to the HOA board. I explained my concerns about the missing safety equipment and overdue inspections, and I suggested we might want to address these issues before pursuing aesthetic violations. I was trying to be diplomatic, give them a chance to do the right thing. Natasha's response came back within 2 hours, and it was anything but diplomatic. Mr. Walsh, your continued harassment of this board is noted. The items you mention are administrative matters that don't concern individual homeowners. Your violation fine stands, and we expect immediate compliance with community standards. Further interference with board operations may result in additional penalties. Harassment? I was trying to prevent someone's kid from getting hurt on unsafe playground equipment. But here's the mini twist that changed everything. I realized Natasha was so focused on aesthetics that she probably had no idea these safety violations existed. Which meant if I could document them properly, I'd have some serious leverage. I spent that weekend doing what I do best, systematic inspection. I walked every inch of our common areas with my camera, taking detailed photos of every safety issue I could find. The missing pool equipment, the uninspected playground, but also things I hadn't noticed before, like the decorative lighting fixtures along our main walkway. Beautiful? Absolutely. Up to electrical code? That was questionable. The installation looked recent, probably part of Natasha's beautification projects, but I couldn't see any electrical permits posted anywhere. By Sunday night, I had 17 photos documenting various safety and code compliance issues in our community common areas. Issues that, according to my research, could result in serious liability for the HOA if someone got hurt. I wasn't looking to cause trouble. I just wanted my wind barrier fine dropped and these safety issues addressed. But sometimes when you start pulling one thread, the whole sweater unravels. Monday morning brought another surprise in my mailbox. Not just one violation notice, but a certified letter from the HOA's attorney. The envelope felt thick and official, the kind of correspondence that makes your stomach drop before you even open it. The letter was 2 pages of legal jargon, but the message was clear. Pay the $900 fine within 10 days or face lien placement on my property. A lien on my house for protecting it from a storm. But buried in all that legal language was something interesting. The letter claimed my wind barriers violated city building codes, not just HOA standards. That got my attention because I'd specifically chosen barriers that didn't require permits. They were temporary, non-permanent installations designed exactly for situations like this. I called Austin's building permit office that afternoon. "Hi, I'm calling to verify code requirements for temporary wind protection structures." And the clerk was helpful and clear. If it's truly temporary, installed and removed within 72 hours, and doesn't involve permanent ground anchoring, no permit is required. Sounds like what you're describing falls under emergency weather protection, which is explicitly allowed. So Natasha's attorney was wrong about the building codes. Strike one. But here's where things got interesting. While I had the permit office on the phone, I asked about other recent permits in our neighborhood. "Could you tell me what permits have been pulled for Sunset Meadows development in the past year?" "Let me check. I show landscaping permits for the entrance areas and that's it. Nothing else on file." "What about electrical work? We had new lighting installed along our walkways." "No electrical permits on file for your development." Strike two. That weekend, I decided to take a closer look at our beautiful new decorative lighting. The fixtures were definitely professional grade, expensive bronze lanterns with underground wiring, the kind of installation that definitely requires electrical permits and inspection. I was examining one of the fixtures when Jerry, my retired firefighter neighbor, walked over. "Nice lights," he said. "Must have cost a fortune." "Yeah, they're beautiful. You ever notice anything weird about the installation?" Jerry knelt down and looked at where the wiring disappeared into the ground. His expression changed. "Eugene, this junction box isn't rated for outdoor burial. See how it's already showing rust stains? That's a fire hazard waiting to happen." Jerry spent 30 years with Austin Fire Department. When he says something's a fire hazard, you listen. "Gets worse," he continued, pointing to another fixture. "Look at the spacing. These are way too close to those oak trees. When branches grow out, they're going to create contact hazards. One good storm and you could have live wires touching tree branches." I started taking more photos and Jerry helped me document what we were seeing. Improper junction boxes, inadequate spacing from vegetation, and wiring that looked like it had been installed by someone who prioritized appearance over safety. "Jerry, in your professional opinion, would this installation pass electrical inspection?" "Not a chance. Whoever installed this cut corners to make it look pretty." That evening I did some research on electrical code requirements. Texas follows the National Electrical Code pretty strictly, and outdoor lighting installations have specific rules about burial depth, junction box ratings, and clearance from vegetation. Our beautiful new lights violated at least 4 different code requirements. But here's the real kicker. I found the invoices. I was reviewing HOA financial documents that homeowners can request, looking for the electrical contractor information, when I noticed something that made my quality control instincts scream. The lighting installation invoice was from Richmond Landscaping Services. Richmond, as in Natasha Richmond. I cross-referenced the business license database. Richmond Landscaping Services was registered to Natasha's husband, David Richmond. They'd paid her husband's company $43,000 for landscaping work that included electrical installation. But when I checked David Richmond's contractor licenses, guess what I found? He was licensed for landscaping, not electrical work. Let me break this down for you. Unlicensed electrical work in Texas isn't just a code violation, it's a criminal misdemeanor. And if that work causes property damage or injury, the liability exposure is enormous. I now had documentation showing that our HOA president had funneled $43,000 to her husband's company for work he wasn't licensed to perform, creating multiple safety hazards in the process. Wednesday evening, I sent another polite email to the board. I laid out the electrical code violations, the permit issues, and suggested we might want to have a licensed electrician inspect the work before someone got hurt. Natasha's response came Thursday morning, and this time she wasn't even pretending to be professional. Mr. Walsh, your continued attempts to undermine this board's legitimate authority will no longer be tolerated. You have 48 hours to pay your violation fine, or we will proceed with lien placement. Any further harassment of board members or staff will result in additional penalties. Harassment? I was trying to prevent electrical fires, but that word, legitimate authority, stuck with me, because I was starting to wonder just how legitimate Natasha's authority really was. By Thursday afternoon, I realized I was dealing with someone who would never back down from a fight. Natasha had doubled down on the fine, ignored legitimate safety concerns, and was now threatening my home. The smell of rain that evening reminded me of that first storm, when my barriers had protected my family while her pride put everyone at risk. But Friday brought a development I never saw coming. I was getting ready for work when Marcus came running into the kitchen. "Dad, you need to see this." He handed me his phone, showing our neighborhood Facebook group. Natasha had posted a long message about maintaining community standards and dealing with disruptive residents who prioritize their personal convenience over neighborhood property values. She didn't mention me by name, but everyone knew who she was talking about. The post had 37 comments, and they were enlightening. Most supported Natasha, talking about property values and aesthetic standards. But a few residents raised concerns. Mrs. Patterson, who lives 2 streets over, commented, "I noticed the playground equipment looks pretty worn. Shouldn't we focus on safety before aesthetics?" Another resident, Tom Valdez, wrote, "My daughter slipped by the pool last week. Are we sure all the safety equipment is up to code?" That's when I realized something important. Other people had noticed the same issues I'd documented, but they were afraid to speak up against Natasha directly. She'd created an environment where questioning the board's priorities was seen as being disruptive. That afternoon, I decided to do something that would either solve this problem or make it much worse. I requested a full set of HOA financial records and meeting minutes for the past 18 months. As a homeowner, I had the legal right to review these documents, though I had to pay a small copying fee. What I found in those records made my inspector training scream red alerts. The HOA had spent over $120,000 on beautification projects in the past year. But when I traced the vendor payments, a pattern emerged that made my stomach turn. Richmond Landscaping Services wasn't just paid for the lighting project. They'd received payments for fountain installation, decorative stonework, entrance sign upgrades, and something called aesthetic consultation services. Total payments to Natasha's husband's company, $87,000. But here's where it gets really interesting. I compared these expenses against our HOA budget, which homeowners approve annually. The budget line item for landscaping was only $32,000 for the entire year. Where did the extra $55,000 come from? I found my answer in the meeting minutes. The board had approved multiple emergency aesthetic upgrades throughout the year, each one justified as necessary to maintain competitive property values. These emergency votes bypassed the normal homeowner approval process for large expenditures. According to our HOA bylaws, any single expense over $15,000 requires homeowner notification and a 30-day comment period. But Natasha's board had been breaking these expenses into smaller chunks to avoid the approval requirements. Classic accounting manipulation. For example, the fountain project was billed as 3 separate invoices. Site preparation, $12,000, equipment installation, $14,500, and finishing work, $11,800. Total cost, $38,300 for a project that should have required homeowner approval. I spent Saturday morning researching Texas HOA law, and what I learned made me realize this situation was bigger than just my wind barrier fine. When HOA boards circumvent spending approval processes and funnel contracts to board members' family businesses, that's called self-dealing, and it's illegal. But the real bombshell came when I cross-referenced the contractor license database again. David Richmond's landscaping license had expired 8 months ago. He'd been performing contracted work for the HOA without a valid license. Sunday evening, I made copies of everything and drove to Jerry's house. He looked through the financial records while I explained what I'd found. "Eugene, this is serious stuff. Self-dealing, unlicensed contractors, safety violations. If someone gets hurt, and this comes out in a lawsuit, the HOA's insurance might not cover it. What do you think I should do? Well, you could take this to the state attorney general's office, or you could try one more time to work with the board. I decided to try the diplomatic approach first. Monday morning, I sent a detailed email to all 5 board members, outlining the financial irregularities, the contractor licensing issues, and the safety violations I'd documented. I offered to discuss solutions privately before taking any formal action. The response came Tuesday morning from Natasha herself, and it told me everything I needed to know about her character. Mr. Walsh, your baseless accusations and continued harassment of this board constitute defamation. We are forwarding your communications to our attorney for appropriate legal action. Additionally, due to your disruptive behavior, you are hereby banned from all HOA common areas pending resolution of your outstanding violations. Banned from the community amenities I helped pay for. But that word defamation was interesting, because defamation requires false statements, and everything I documented was absolutely, verifiably true, which meant Natasha was either lying about the facts or she didn't understand what defamation actually means. Either way, I was done playing nice. That Tuesday evening, I made a decision that would change everything. I was done trying to work within Natasha's system. It was time to go around her entirely. I started by calling the Texas State Board of Architectural Examiners. See, when contractors perform work outside their license scope, it's not just a local code issue. It becomes a state regulatory matter. And when that work creates safety hazards, multiple agencies get interested real fast. I need to report unlicensed electrical work performed by a landscaping contractor, I told the intake specialist. What's the nature of the safety hazard? Improper burial boxes, inadequate clearance from vegetation, and fire hazards in a residential community. How many residents are potentially affected? 67 families. There was a pause. Sir, I'm going to need you to file a formal complaint with documentation. This sounds like it might trigger a multi-agency investigation. Multi-agency. Those were beautiful words to my ears. That weekend, I spent hours organizing my evidence into a comprehensive file. Photos of every safety violation, financial records showing the self-dealing contractor license databases showing the expired credentials, and HOA bylaws showing the circumvented approval processes. But as I worked through the documents, I noticed something that made my quality control training absolutely sing with recognition. This wasn't just about one corrupt board president. This was a systematic pattern of regulatory circumvention that touched multiple state agencies. Let me break down what I'd discovered. The electrical work without permits violated building codes. That's code enforcement. Unlicensed contractor work violated state licensing laws. That's the State Board of Architectural Examiners. The pool safety violations violated health codes. That's the health department. The playground inspection failures violated child safety regulations. That's Child Protective Services and Parks Department oversight. The stormwater management issues from the landscaping violated EPA regulations. That's Environmental Protection Agency. But here's the really beautiful part. The financial self-dealing violated HOA governance laws, which fall under the State Attorney General's jurisdiction. And when electrical work creates fire hazards, that brings in the State Fire Marshal's office. I'd accidentally stumbled onto what regulatory professionals call a cascade failure, where one violation in a complex system triggers failures across multiple regulatory domains. Wednesday morning, I started making calls, not to complain or threaten, just to report factual safety violations and request appropriate inspections. First call, Austin Fire Marshal's office. I need to report electrical fire hazards in a residential community. Second call, Texas Environmental Protection Agency. I need to report unpermitted stormwater modifications that may be affecting drainage systems. Third call, Travis County Health Department. I need to report missing safety equipment at a community pool serving 67 families. Fourth call, Texas State Attorney General's HOA Division. I need to report financial self-dealing by an HOA board. Each agency told me the same thing. File a formal complaint with documentation, and they'd initiate appropriate investigations. By Friday afternoon, I had filed detailed complaints with 7 different regulatory agencies. Each complaint cross-referenced the others, creating a paper trail that would be impossible for any single agency to ignore. But here's what I didn't expect: the speed at which things started moving. Monday morning, I got a call from Travis County Health Department. Mr. Walsh, we've reviewed your complaint about Sunset Meadows Community Pool. We're scheduling an emergency inspection for Thursday. Will you be available to meet our inspector on site? Tuesday brought a call from the fire marshal's office. Mr. Walsh, we're coordinating with code enforcement for a joint inspection of the electrical hazards you reported. Can you walk our teams through the locations you documented? Wednesday, Environmental Protection Agency. Mr. Walsh, we're opening a formal investigation into unpermitted stormwater modifications at your community. We'll need to interview the contractors involved. By Thursday morning, I had 6 different agency investigations either scheduled or already underway. Each agency was working independently, but they were all focused on the same community and the same pattern of regulatory corner-cutting that Natasha had created in her obsession with aesthetics over safety. That afternoon, my phone rang. It was Natasha, and for the first time since this whole thing started, she didn't sound angry. She sounded scared. Eugene, what exactly have you done? I reported safety violations to the appropriate regulatory agencies, I told Natasha, keeping my voice perfectly calm. The same violations I tried to discuss with the board before you threatened to place a lien on my house. You don't understand what you've started, she said. These inspections could shut down community amenities. Property values will tank. Then maybe you should have listened when I offered to discuss solutions privately. She hung up on me. That evening, I realized something that made my strategic planning instincts kick into high gear. Natasha was scared because she knew exactly how bad this could get, which meant she'd probably try to cover her tracks, blame others, or maybe even attempt some kind of preemptive damage control. I needed to be ready for whatever came next. I spent that weekend organizing everything into what I call a documentation fortress. See, in quality control, you learn that having evidence isn't enough. You need evidence that's organized, accessible, and legally bulletproof. First, I created digital copies of everything, stored in 3 separate locations: my laptop, an external drive, and cloud storage. Every photo, every financial record, every email exchange, every agency complaint form. The whole file was over 200 pages when printed. Then I created what I call an escalation timeline, a chronological record showing exactly how this situation had developed. Starting with my original wind barrier installation, through each HOA violation notice, every attempt I'd made to resolve things diplomatically, and every piece of evidence I'd discovered along the way. The timeline was crucial because it showed a clear pattern. I'd tried to work within the system. Natasha had rejected every reasonable solution, and only then had I involved outside agencies. But here's where my manufacturing background really helped. I knew that when regulatory agencies investigate complex violations, they need someone who can walk them through the technical details clearly and efficiently. So I prepared what I called inspection briefings for each agency. For the fire marshal, I created a simple map showing each electrical hazard location, with photos and specific code violations clearly marked. I researched exactly which National Electrical Code sections were violated, and I prepared one-sentence explanations that any inspector could understand. For the health department, I documented not just the missing pool safety equipment, but also the required Texas Health Code sections that specified exactly what should be present. I even found the manufacturer specifications for compliant equipment with pricing, so they'd know this wasn't about money, it was about priorities. For environmental protection, I traced the stormwater modifications using county drainage maps, showing how the landscaping changes had affected water flow patterns. I'd learned this technique from dealing with manufacturing runoff issues. Follow the water, document the changes, show the environmental impact. Tuesday brought my first inspection walkthrough. The Travis County Health Inspector, a no-nonsense woman named Sarah Tatum, met me at the community pool at 2 p.m. "Show me what you're concerned about," she said, pulling out a tablet and digital camera. I walked her through each missing safety item systematically. No reaching poles, required every 50 feet of pool perimeter. No ring buoys, required every 75 feet. No posted emergency procedures, required at every pool entrance. Mr. Walsh, in your professional opinion, how long have these items been missing? Based on my observations over 3 years, I don't think they were ever installed. She photographed everything, took measurements, and made detailed notes. This pool serves how many families? 67 homes, average of about 200 people during summer months. And children use this facility regularly? Every afternoon after school. Weekends are packed. She shook her head. This is a serious liability issue. The HOA's insurance carrier should have required compliance before coverage began. Wednesday brought the fire marshal inspection, and that's when things got really interesting. Fire Marshal Rodriguez arrived with an electrical inspector and a code enforcement officer, 3 professionals, all focused on Natasha's beautiful lighting project. The electrical inspector spent 20 minutes examining just the first fixture. "This junction box isn't rated for burial," he told the fire marshal. "It's already showing moisture penetration and corrosion." "What's the fire risk?" Rodriguez asked. "High, especially with the tree clearance issues. Next storm could put live wires in contact with wet vegetation." They documented everything systematically, measuring clearances, photographing violations, testing connections. By the end of the inspection, they'd identified 12 separate code violations just in the lighting system. "Mr. Walsh," Fire Marshal Rodriguez said as we finished, "who was the electrical contractor for this installation?" "That's part of the problem. The work was done by a landscaping company whose electrical credentials had expired." His expression got very serious very quickly. "Unlicensed electrical work that creates fire hazards? That's criminal negligence if someone gets hurt." By Thursday, I had a folder full of preliminary inspection reports, each one documenting serious safety violations that Natasha's board had either ignored or created. But I also knew she wasn't going to go down without a fight. Friday morning brought the counterattack I'd been expecting, but it was worse than I'd imagined. I was checking my email before work when I found a message that made my blood run cold. It was sent to the entire neighborhood mailing list from Natasha's official HOA president account with the subject line, "Protecting our community from harassment." The email was a masterpiece of manipulation. Natasha painted herself as the victim of a vindictive resident who has weaponized government agencies against his own neighbors. She claimed I was retaliating against legitimate HOA enforcement and that my frivolous complaints could result in thousands of dollars in unnecessary repair costs that would burden every homeowner through special assessments. But the really dirty part was how she framed the safety violations. She called them minor administrative oversights and suggested that I was exaggerating small issues to avoid paying a legitimate fine. The email ended with a call for community solidarity against harassment and announced that the board would be holding an emergency meeting to address this disruptive situation. My phone started ringing within an hour. First call was from Mrs. Patterson, the elderly woman who'd expressed concern about the playground. "Eugene, I'm so sorry. I had no idea things would get this complicated." "Mrs. Patterson, what do you mean?" "Well, after Natasha's email, I'm worried that if I support your safety concerns, my property taxes might go up from those special assessments she mentioned." Next call was from Tom Valdez, whose daughter had slipped by the pool. "Eugene, look, I appreciate what you're trying to do, but my wife is worried this could affect our home value. We're trying to refinance." I realized what Natasha was doing. She was using financial fear to turn neighbors against me, making them choose between safety and money. But Saturday brought a development that showed me just how dirty she was willing to fight. I was working in my garage when my neighbor across the street, Linda Morrison, walked over looking uncomfortable. "Eugene, I need to tell you something. Natasha came by yesterday evening." "What did she want?" "She asked me a lot of questions about you, about your boys, your work schedule, whether you seemed unstable since your wife died." My hands clenched. "What kind of questions?" "Whether I'd ever seen you drinking during the day, if your boys seemed neglected, if you'd ever been aggressive or threatening." She said she was gathering information about a concerning resident situation. That's when I realized Natasha wasn't just fighting my safety complaints. She was building a character assassination campaign. Monday morning confirmed it. I got a call from my boys' school counselor. "Mr. Walsh, I wanted to give you a heads up. Someone called our office asking questions about Marcus and David's attendance and behavior. Said they were concerned about the boys' home stability after recent family stress." "Who called?" They identified themselves as representing the homeowners association. Said it was related to a neighborhood safety assessment. I saw red. Going after my kids? That crossed every line I knew. But that afternoon brought news that helped me understand just how desperate Natasha had become. Jerry stopped by with information that made everything click into place. "Eugene, my wife was at the grocery store this morning, ran into David Richmond, Natasha's husband. He looked stressed out, and she asked if everything was okay." "What did he say?" "He said something about state investigators asking questions about his contracting work. Said Natasha was handling it. but he was worried about losing their business. The pieces fell together. Natasha's desperate counterattack wasn't just about winning our HOA dispute. Her husband's contracting business was under state investigation, which could mean criminal charges and financial ruin. She was fighting for her family's financial survival. That evening, I got a call from Fire Marshal Rodriguez that confirmed my suspicions. "Mr. Walsh, I wanted to update you on our investigation. We've identified serious patterns of unlicensed work across multiple communities. Your complaint triggered a broader investigation into Richmond Landscaping Services." "How broad?" "We're coordinating with the Attorney General's office. This could involve criminal charges for unlicensed contracting and endangering public safety." Wednesday brought Natasha's most desperate move yet. I found another certified letter in my mailbox, but this one wasn't from the HOA attorney. It was from something called Community Protection Services, claiming to be a neighborhood safety assessment company. The letter informed me that I was being investigated for concerning behavior patterns and potential threat assessment following multiple resident complaints about harassment and instability. I researched the company. It didn't exist. The address was a P.O. box, and the phone number went to a voicemail that just repeated the company name. Natasha was creating fake organizations to intimidate me. That evening, I called my own attorney for the first time. Sometimes you need professional help to deal with people who've completely lost their moral compass. My attorney, Rebecca Santos, listened to my story for 45 minutes without interrupting. When I finished, she leaned back in her chair and shook her head. "Eugene, this woman has committed several crimes just in what you've described to me today. Impersonating a safety company, making false reports about your children, harassment through financial intimidation, and that's before we get to the HOA governance violations. What do you recommend? Document everything, respond to nothing directly, and let me handle communications going forward. She's desperate, which makes her dangerous." Rebecca was right about the dangerous part. Thursday morning brought Natasha's most unhinged move yet. I was getting ready for work when I heard voices in my front yard. Looking out the window, I saw Natasha with two other women I didn't recognize, plus a man holding what looked like a camera or tablet. I stepped outside to see what was happening. "There he is," Natasha announced loudly. "The one I was telling you about." One of the women, holding a clipboard, approached me. "Sir, we're conducting a neighborhood wellness assessment. Are you Eugene Walsh?" "Who's asking?" "I'm with Community Safety Services. We're investigating reports of concerning behavior and property maintenance issues." Another fake company. But this time, Natasha had recruited actual people to help with her intimidation campaign. "I'm going to need to see some credentials," I said, pulling out my phone to start recording. "Sir, there's no need to be hostile. We're just trying to ensure neighborhood safety." "Lady, I don't know who you are or who's paying you, but you're on my property without permission. Please leave." That's when the man with the tablet spoke up. "We're documenting potential code violations and safety hazards associated with this property." I realized what was happening. Natasha was creating her own fake inspection to counter the real ones that were destroying her position. She'd probably recruited these people through some kind of property management service, telling them I was the problem resident. "You need to leave now or I'm calling the police," I said clearly, making sure my phone recording captured everything. They left, but not before taking photos of my house, my car, and even my mailbox. That afternoon, I forwarded the recording to Rebecca and to the detective handling the Attorney General's investigation into Natasha's HOA violations. Within 2 hours, I got a call that made my day. "Mr. Walsh, this is Detective Morrison with the AG's office. We need to talk about escalating this investigation. What happened at your house today constitutes criminal harassment and possibly fraud." Friday brought the news I'd been waiting for. The final agency inspection reports were complete, and they were devastating for Natasha's position. Fire Marshal. 12 electrical code violations creating imminent fire hazard. Health Department. Systematic safety equipment failures requiring immediate pool closure. Environmental Protection. Unpermitted stormwater modifications requiring restoration and potential fines. Code Enforcement. Multiple unlicensed construction violations requiring professional remediation. But the real bombshell came from the Attorney General's financial investigation. They'd discovered that Richmond Landscaping Services had received over $300,000 from 6 different HOA communities managed by the same board members. It wasn't just self-dealing, it was organized fraud. Saturday evening, I got the call I'd been both expecting and dreading. Eugene, this is Natasha. We need to talk. All communication goes through my attorney. Please. I'm trying to fix this before it gets worse. It's already worse, Natasha. You've committed multiple crimes trying to cover up your husband's unlicensed work. I never meant for it to go this far. Can we work out some kind of arrangement? What kind of arrangement? I'll drop the fine. We'll fix the safety issues. David will get properly licensed. Just please don't pursue the criminal charges. I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. Natasha, I tried to work out an arrangement 6 months ago. You threatened my home, harassed my children, and created fake companies to intimidate me. This isn't about my wind barrier fine anymore. Then what do you want? I want you to face the consequences of your choices. And I want our community to have leadership that prioritizes safety over profit. She hung up, but the damage was done. She'd essentially confessed to the fraud on a recorded phone line. Sunday brought one final attempt at manipulation. Natasha sent an email to the entire neighborhood announcing an emergency community meeting for Monday evening to address false accusations and protect our community from frivolous government interference. She was going to make one last stand, trying to turn the neighbors against me in a public forum. Perfect, because I was ready for a public forum too. And this time, I wouldn't be facing her alone. Monday evening, 6:30 p.m., the community center was packed with residents I'd never seen at an HOA meeting before. Word had spread about the government investigations, and people wanted answers. Natasha had positioned herself at the front of the room with her remaining board allies, looking like she was preparing for battle. She'd even brought a PowerPoint presentation and professional-looking handouts, but what she didn't know was that I'd brought some guests of my own. At 6:45, Detective Morrison from the Attorney General's office walked in, followed by Fire Marshal Rodriguez and Health Inspector Tatum. They took seats in the back row, notebooks ready. The meeting started with Natasha's presentation, protecting our community from government overreach. She talked about property values, community standards, and the dangers of letting disruptive residents weaponize government agencies. She clicked through slides showing our community's beautiful amenities, talking about how minor administrative oversights were being blown out of proportion by someone with a personal vendetta. The truth is, she said, looking directly at me, this is all about one resident who refused to pay a legitimate fine and decided to retaliate by filing frivolous complaints with multiple agencies. Murmurs of agreement from some neighbors. She was good at this. But we're not going to let external interference destroy what we've built here. I've consulted with our attorney, and we have grounds to sue for harassment and defamation. That's when I stood up. Point of order, Natasha. Can I address the community about these frivolous complaints? You'll have your turn during public comment. Actually, Detective Morrison said from the back, we'd like to hear from Mr. Walsh now. The room got very quiet very quickly. I walked to the front, carrying a folder that everyone could see was thick with documents. Neighbors, I want to start by showing you what frivolous complaints look like to professional investigators. I held up the fire marshal's report. 12 electrical code violations creating fire hazards that could kill people. These aren't administrative oversights. These are life-threatening safety failures. I held up the health department report. Missing safety equipment that's required by law at every public pool, equipment that could save a child's life. Then I held up the financial investigation summary. $300,000 in contracts awarded to unlicensed contractors owned by our board president's husband. Contracts that bypassed homeowner approval requirements and created the safety hazards we're dealing with. The room was completely silent now. But here's what really matters, I continued. 6 months ago, I tried to discuss these issues privately with the board. I was told I was being disruptive. When I documented safety violations, I was threatened with liens. When I asked for transparency, I was accused of harassment. I turned to look at Natasha. And when that didn't work, you started investigating my children and creating fake companies to intimidate me. That's a lie, Natasha shouted, standing up. Is it? I pulled out my phone and played the recording from Thursday morning. Natasha's voice came through clearly. Sir, we're conducting a neighborhood wellness assessment. The room erupted. Neighbors were talking over each other, some standing up, everyone looking confused and angry. Order! Shouted Board Member Williams, who'd been silent until now. That's when Fire Marshal Rodriguez stood up. Ladies and gentlemen, I need to address some things that have been said tonight. The room fell silent again. I've been with Austin Fire Department for 18 years. I've never seen such systematic safety violations in a single community. The electrical hazards alone could have resulted in multiple structure fires. He looked directly at Natasha. These aren't frivolous complaints, these are violations that put lives at risk, and the unlicensed electrical work constitutes criminal negligence under Texas law. Health Inspector Tatum stood up next. The pool safety violations we documented would result in immediate closure at any commercial facility. The fact that children have been using this pool without required safety equipment is unconscionable. Then Detective Morrison delivered the knockout punch. Ms. Richmond, based on our investigation, we're recommending criminal charges for fraud, unlicensed contracting, and criminal harassment. Your husband's company has been operating illegally in multiple communities. Natasha's face went white. You can't prove any of this. Actually, I said, we can. I held up the financial records. Every contract, every bypassed approval, every payment to Richmond Landscaping Services while their license was expired, plus recorded phone calls where you admitted to trying to work out arrangements to avoid criminal charges. The room exploded again, but this time the anger was directed at Natasha. You risked our children's safety for money? Shouted Mrs. Patterson. How much is this going to cost us to fix? Demanded Tom Valdez. Natasha tried one last desperate play. You're all letting him destroy our community over a wind barrier fine. That's when I delivered my mic drop moment. Natasha, this stopped being about my wind barrier the moment you chose profit over safety. You created these problems, you ignored these dangers, and you attacked my family when I tried to protect yours. I looked around the room at my neighbors. The question isn't whether we can afford to fix these problems, it's whether we can afford not to. The emergency board vote happened right there in the community center, with Detective Morrison documenting everything for the criminal investigation. Natasha was removed as president by a vote of 4-1, her own vote being the only dissent. Mrs. Patterson was elected interim president, and her first act was to drop my wind barrier fine. Her second was to authorize immediate repairs for all documented safety violations. The final tally was sobering: $43,000 to bring the electrical systems up to code, $12,000 for proper pool safety equipment, $8,000 for playground inspection and repairs, and $15,000 for environmental remediation. But here's the thing about doing the right thing. Sometimes the universe rewards you. Our HOA's insurance company, when they learned about the safety violations, actually covered 80% of the repair costs under their liability protection clause. Turns out insurance companies really don't like unlicensed electrical work that could burn down neighborhoods. Natasha and David Richmond faced criminal charges for fraud and unlicensed contracting. David plea bargained down to community service and license suspension, but had to pay restitution to 6 different HOA communities. Natasha resigned from all positions and moved away 3 months later. The criminal investigation revealed that their scheme had defrauded homeowner associations across Central Texas out of over $500,000. My wind barrier complaint had accidentally exposed one of the largest HOA fraud cases in Texas history. But the real victory was watching our community come together once the truth was out. Tom Valdez, the guy who'd been worried about property values, became our new safety committee chairman. Mrs. Patterson established a quarterly financial transparency meeting where every homeowner can review expenses before they're approved. Jerry, my retired firefighter neighbor, started a community emergency preparedness program. We now have proper storm protocols, emergency supply coordination, and yes, guidelines for temporary weather protection that actually prioritize safety over aesthetics. The boys, Marcus and David, learned something valuable about standing up for what's right, even when it's difficult. Marcus actually wrote his college application essay about watching his dad fight for community safety. Both boys got into their first choice schools. As for me, I discovered I had a talent for regulatory compliance consulting. I now help other communities audit their safety procedures and governance practices. It's satisfying work, using my quality control background to prevent the kind of disasters that happen when people prioritize appearance over safety. We established the Sarah Walsh Community Safety Fund in my wife's memory, providing grants for safety equipment and emergency preparedness in underserved communities. Because if there's one thing I learned from this whole experience, it's that safety isn't a luxury. It's a fundamental responsibility we owe each other. The fund has already helped 12 communities install proper safety equipment, conduct required inspections, and train residents in emergency response. Last month, we prevented a playground tragedy when our inspection program identified failing equipment at a low-income housing complex. 6 months after that community center meeting, we had a block party to celebrate the completion of all safety repairs. The new electrical systems were beautiful and compliant. The pool had all required safety equipment plus extra features for accessibility. The playground had been completely rebuilt to exceed current safety standards. And when the next storm hit, a bad one, with 70-mile-per-hour winds, our community was ready. People helped each other with proper storm preparation, checked on elderly neighbors, and coordinated emergency response. No one complained about temporary protective measures because everyone understood that safety comes first. Natasha's beautiful but dangerous lighting was replaced with LED fixtures that were both aesthetically pleasing and code compliant. The new installations actually increased property values more than her original work because potential buyers could see the community prioritized both beauty and safety. Now, I want to hear from you. Have you ever dealt with an HOA that put aesthetics over safety? A board that ignored legitimate concerns or retaliated against residents who spoke up? Share your HOA nightmare stories in the comments below, because the more we talk about these issues, the more we can prevent them from happening to other families. And if this story resonated with you, hit that subscribe button and ring the bell for notifications, because I've got more stories about standing up to petty authority, and next time, I'm going to tell you about the contractor who tried to use substandard materials in a school renovation project. Until then, remember, your safety is worth more than someone else's pride. Stand up, speak up, and never let anyone tell you that protecting your family is being disruptive. Thanks for watching.